Hello and welcome back to What Do I Know? Why did CEC's investigations fail and were declared legally invalid and now lie in tatters in the gutter? This is video number 2 and this will now explore ground 2 and I'm going to cut to the chase and get straight into it. Ground 2. Failure to serve complaints against an individual and then adjudicate them, thus preventing a fair hearing. Breach of Article 6 Human Rights Act 1998. There are 2 counts that were considered here. We again consider the law and what must be done. When issuing standards complaints documents, you are prima facie issuing an allegation against a council member. The council member has the right to be able to defend themselves, particularly where, and as was the case with HPC, there are statements and assertions made against them which are inherently untrue and subject to invention and concoction. There was an addenda done here and added the word collusion. To be able to understand this ground and the provable breaches thereof, we must first turn to law itself. Article 6 Human Rights Act 1998 states, you have the right to a fair and public trial or hearing if you are charged with a criminal offence and have to go to court. Now here's the catcher. Or a public authority is making a decision that has an impact upon your civil rights or obligations. At this junction, it's critical to note that both points are on an or basis. You do not need to show or prove both. Article 6 is both applicable and operable in this case. The CEC is a public authority sought to make decisions which would impact on the civil rights and obligations of BT, BB and AB. You reach this, they go on to state the civil rights and obligations relate to their roles as councillors, whether parish councillors or in the case of BB also a county councillor, a ward councillor. Civil rights, in this case, are rights and freedoms given to residents and citizens of this country through our country's legal system. These include freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. Our rights are legally protected, which means that everyone has the right to live a safe life, free from harassment and hatred. Now bear that in mind as well, civil rights. I forgot to mention that, didn't I? These investigations, if done incorrectly, would have an inherently negative impact upon the civil liberties of BT, BB and AB. As the investigations have been carried out incorrectly without consideration of key aspects of law, there has been a material impact on the civil liberties of BT, BB and AB. BT and BB have since tragically passed, but prior to that, and together with AB, received an unannounced visit from the police telling them to keep safe. This was in the midst of the investigations and the intentions are still unclear. That made a direct impact upon their civil liberties. They were made to feel inherently unsafe in their own homes. They stated, we, our families and friends, were also made to suffer a dreadfully high amount of harassment as a result of the botched manner in which the investigation was concluded. Before moving on, consideration must be given to what rights were we actually had and we were entitled to. We had the right to, and this is what the assessment held and found, be presumed innocent until we were proven guilty. Be told as early as possible what we were accused of. Remain silent. Have enough time to prepare our responses and or case. Access to all relevant information. Put forward our side of the matter and our case. And either question the main parties against us or to call other witnesses or insert other evidence supporting our case. This is what was noted in the assessment. Everyone must have equal access to these rights at all times. As will be seen below, there were 2 members of this particular group that were simply not afforded this right. Finally, in order to ensure that Article 6 rights are respected and fully offered, the rules of service of a document must be observed. This assessment stated that even though this was not a litigated matter, these rules still strictly applied and should have been applied. The rules of service are absolute. There was only reliance on the rules of email service. As will be seen, this was insufficient. The applicable rules of service are the same as those found in Part 6 of Civil Procedure Rules, and they are definitive in what can be constituted as acceptable service. CPR Part 6 notes several methods of acceptable service, including inter alia 1. Personal service, 2. First-class post, 3. Delivery of documents or leaving them in a permitted place, fax, other electronic method, or alternative method or place. You absolutely should at all times attempt to use more than one of these methods. As will be seen, this simply did not happen. Now here comes the impact statement. Who is affected and how? There were 2 persons affected by this material failure, and they were the late Councillor Burkhill and the former Councillor Brewerton. Of course, I had to write this, like I said before in the previous video, because I was sole survivor and the sole surviving victim. As I'm now seen, and Mary Bryan are now seen. So how were we affected? And this is how the impact statement I drafted in these cases. We both suffered a situation where complaints were not served on us, thus meaning we were not able to respond. Furthermore, these complaints were in fact adjudicated against us. Therefore, the rights listed in the analysis above were not afforded to us at any time. BB was the first person not to have a complaint served against him and then have it adjudicated against him. The complaint in question was first received by BT. BT advised BB and myself of the receipt thereof. He also advised that clearly there were 2 names redacted in the section which details who the complaint was made against. I can confirm now that we knew those 2 names were mine and Barry's. It meant that BB and myself had reason to believe that we would receive this complaint, which we now know we should have done. I never got it. The thing was, it was never adjudicated against me. It was just held against Brian and Barry. BT did ask CEC if he could forward it to myself and BB, but he was told that he could not do so as it would be a breach of GDPR. I can't see how that is right, but I'm not. This is not the time or place to go into this. I still hold that that's not right. I never did receive it, and found out only after the investigation that I was not subject to that complaint. I thought all the way through that I was, so that's not a good feeling to have. Yeah, I was given the impression when we suddenly realised from the investigation that I was subject to the lot. I now know the first one I wasn't. It was different for BB. He was subject to that complaint and it was never served on him, thus meaning he could never respond in defence to the allegations made therein. Of major concern, the first time he knew that he was subject to that complaint was when he was approached without notification, as noted in ground 1 by the investigator, that being Mr. Robinson. This approach was in or around November 2020. BB advised the investigator that he had not received the complaint. The investigator sent BB the documents, which included a determination notice. This caused BB great upset and distress. He had wanted to respond to this complaint. He had approached myself and at the time, now former councillor Jean Thompson, but she was still a councillor at that time, as witnesses in his support. None of his evidence was therefore considered, and this complaint was upheld against him. Further to that, when BB notified and advised the investigator he had not had these documents served upon him, the investigator responded, and in writing, and the assessment did see this email, stating that this will be something we can run through when we meet. Thus meaning he wanted to go through the documents with Barry there and then. That's not how this works. Barry has to be able to write a full response and submit his evidence. And any investigator worth his or her salt should have known that and immediately seen the glaring omission and error that had been made and said, hang on, I have a problem. And what they should have done, as you will find out, they should not have included Barry in the investigation for that purposes because it's not been served on him. And should have advised CEC to scrap the determination notice and void that complaint against Barry. But I'll get back to the impact statement. BB sought legal advice and was advised that his Article 6 human right to a fair hearing had been seriously breached. BB did advise the investigator of this. We do not know if this was related to CEC, but it should have been. On this discovery, this part of the investigation should have been immediately ceased and this illegality investigated. This was not done. The investigator did not seem to think that it was important, and he wanted to press ahead. This failure will be focused on in more detail in Ground 8. There was also no effort made by the MO or his department to correct this serious and grievous error. The error renders the complaint, its outcome and its investigation against BB completely ineffective and dead. It had to be ceased and dropped, or the whole process recommenced with a brand new service. This was not done. BB's human rights were materially breached once again. The second occurrence directly affected myself and was in relation to a complaint or complaints received regarding the events of the HPC meetings of Thursday 10th of December 2020. The first I knew that complaints had been made against me was when I received a threatening email on or around the 2nd of March 2021 from Bevan Britton telling me that I was to attend a 3v1 meeting as this was being investigated. Again, no notification and no service of any complaint was made. I will also state as well that email should never have come directly to me, it should have gone to my solicitor. So again, that's a misdemeanour from Bevan Britton. I don't blame the author of that email, but I do blame the two behind that person, namely the partner in charge of the department and the investigator himself, who is also under the supervision of that partner. I took legal advice and was told not to attend this meeting as my Article 6 rights to a fair hearing had been materially breached through non-service of the complaint. CEC admitted that the complaint was sent to my parish council email address. Now I've got a second footnote here. The second footnote is the same as the one in Ground 1, but I will reread it so you've got the complete one. This had gone to my HPC account, which the clerk to HPC, Ashley Komsky-Dawson, had advised me was closed and no longer operable at the beginning of January 2020. I did advise CEC of this, and I believe the clerk lied to me in this respect, and that there may have been sabotage or ignorance of my notifying CEC of such a situation. We have actually asked CEC and the clerk to try and disprove that, by the way, and met with silence. So we can take from the silence that our assumption might well be reality and not an assumption or a presumption. I will continue. In this case, reliance on email rules of service would have been without basis as the parish council email address was not in use, was redundant and inaccessible to one of us, all of which was well known to the MO and his department. Indeed, many other officers and members of CEC acknowledge this, and I went on record here to thank them and asked, but why did the MO ignore it? He did not affect proper service via other means, and no attempt was recorded or even made. Therefore, the MO had to ensure he complied with the rules of service, in that he was required to check that the service was made by every available communication method, and to ensure that I received it. He is recorded as posting letters to some of us at this time this was all happening, but with regard to the service of complaints, and for reasons only known to him, and which he has refused to divulge, he failed to do this. Therefore, he did not at any time effect proper service of the complaint. The service that he did effect was faulty. This was a serious occurrence that was reported to Bevan Britton, to Mr. David Kitson. He was the partner in charge. He was responsible for the conduct of the investigator and reported it to the MO, but he knowingly allowed an investigation to proceed, thus breaching the human right to a fair hearing. Alarmingly, Bevan Britton, moreover Mr. Kitson, also failed to recognise the impropriety of the actions being taken against me and against BB. I wasn't even supplied with a copy of the complaint or complaints like BB was. All I was given was a determination notice noting that the complaints had been adjudicated against me. This greatly distressed me, as also the determination notice had said that it had considered my response. Well, I hadn't responded because I'd never been served the complaints. So the determination notice itself was faulty. Again, more distress, hurt and upset was not just laid on me this time, but when I relayed it to family and to the friends, including Barry and Brian, a great deal of distress and upset was also laid on them. I also received a part of an email purportedly sent to me by Mr. Brett Dainty. I do not accept this as real or actual. It gave me good grounds, based on my specialist fraud knowledge, to believe this email was indeed fake, because it was in 3 different colours. Yeah, you heard that. Blue, green and black. I asked Bevan Britton to provide the full email, but nothing was forthcoming except silence. Why did they not do it? As in BB's case, this error renders the complaint, its outcome and its investigation against me completely ineffective and dead. They had to be ceased and dropped, or the whole process recommenced with a brand new service. This was not done. My human rights were materially breached once again. This is now the conclusion to this ground, the concluding statements on what was found. As there is material evidence to show that there has been a material, real terms and serious breach of Article 6, Human Rights Act 1998, right to fair hearing, it is concluded that, on the balance of probabilities, this ground is wholly proved. The assessment also agreed with the findings herein. There was a provable and evidence breach of the said Article 6 HRA 1998. It is clear that complaints were not served against BB and AB, which were then adjudicated against them both, and unfairly. On notification of these series of events, the investigation should have been halted and this illegality made subject to further investigation. This would have meant the investigation would have followed proper procedure and protocol at this time and juncture. The failure to serve the complaints against BB and AB renders them defunct. The only way to have acted was to have recommenced the process. The assessment correctly pointed out that for this to have happened, consent from all parties would have been required. So that would have meant literally Ashley, Smithy, Cynthia and Seymour, as well as myself, Barry and Brian. Now, of course, we'll explore, one refusal to consent would have meant that the complaints cannot be adjudicated nor investigated due to the illegality of failing to serve them. So in other words, we could have wiped that lot out. Woof, gone, straight away. The investigation report would have had to have noted this failure and the result of such. It would also have to note that should no agreement have been forthcoming to gaining consent to reserving of the complaints to start the procedure again, the investigation was defunct and could go no further, and would have had to enter a finding or a conclusion of no findings on the basis of procedural and legal breach. This again didn't happen. It is found that there was no effort made to consciously correct this very serious mistake. That was unconscionable and should never ever have happened. The failure to correctly and properly serve complaints and to then adjudicate them against inflicted parties must be questioned. It is also viewed with serious concern that such a blatant disregard for the human rights of a fair hearing to BT, AB and BP should have occurred. All available evidence points to a cover-up of this mistake and refusal to accept wrongdoing by both CEC's MO and the investigator. This conduct must be investigated and duly questioned, as it did and still does materially impact on AB's civil rights. It severely impugned BB's civil rights prior to his untimely and unexpected death. This failure also had and still has detrimental effects upon the families and friends of BT, BB and AB. The assessment noted that this was unbefitting conduct and should have been instantly addressed. The honourable thing to have done would have been to have admitted the mistake and worked amiably and speedily to correct it as far as was reasonably possible. It would not have been a surprise if consent of all parties to a reserving of the complaints could not have been achieved. The party responsible for ensuring that this mandatory requirement is complied with is CEC's monitoring officer, MO, as he was the founder and originator of the said investigation. The fact that the investigator also seemingly failed on this ground falls on the MO's shoulders. The final line states, "We recommend at this point be placed under investigation at AB's wish, as he is the sole surviving member of this group of 3. Now that's the end of ground 2. The next 2 videos will be doing grounds 3 and 4. I look forward to having you join me. Thank you.